Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Chandana Sajajana Chandana Yashoda Nandana Sajajana Chandana Yamunatira Bhavana Chari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Vasantha Sundabi Jaya Radha Madhava Sundabi Jaya Gopi Jana Shalabha Girivare Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivare Jashodan Nana Sajajana Jashodan Nana Sajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Sasanat Mahari Yamunatira Mahari Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Ram Ram Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupatra Hamsa Parijakachaya Shodashati Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Founder Chaya Shri Prabhupada Ki, Jai Om Vishnupatra Hamsa Parijakachaya Shodashati Shri Srimad, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki, Nikrantarat Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Nitya Gopramanande, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 8, titled Lord Nrsimhadev Slays the King of the Demons, text number 51. Sri Charana Uchu Hare Tavangri Pankajam. Do you wanna switch? This has a bit bigger. Pava Vargam Ashrita Yad Esha Sadhu Hrichayas Vayasura Samapita Hare Tavangri Pankajam Bhava Pavargam Ashrita Yad Esha Sadhu Hrichayas Svayasura Samapita Hare Tavangri Pankajam Bhava Pavargamashrita Yad Esha Yad Esha Sadhu Hrichayas Tva Asura Samapita Hare Tavangri Pankajam Bhava Pavargamashrita Yadesha Sadhu Hrichayas Tvaya Sura Samapita Shri Charana Uchu Hare Tavangri Pankajam Bhava Pavargamashrita Yadesha Sadhu Hrichayas Tvaya Sura Samapita Sri Charana Uchu. The inhabitants of the Charana planet said, Hare, O Lord, Tava, your Angri Pankajam, lotus feet, Bhava Apavargam, the only shelter for becoming free from the contamination of material existence. Ashrita, sheltered by, Yat, because, Esha, this, Sadhu Hrit Shaya, stake in the hearts of all honest persons. Tvaya, by your lordship, Asura, the demon Hiranyakashipu, Samapita, finished. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The inhabitants of the Charana planet said, O Lord, because you have destroyed the demon Hiranyakashipu, who is always a stay in the hearts of all honest men, we are now relieved, and we eternally take shelter of your lotus feet, which award the conditioned soul liberation from material contamination. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his transcendental form of Narahari Nrsimhadev, is always ready to kill the demons who always create disturbances in the minds of honest devotees. To spread the Krishna consciousness movement, devotees have to face many dangers and impediments all over the world. But a faithful servant who preaches with great devotion to the Lord must know that Lord Nrsimhadev is always his protector. Om Meganatamandasya Kinanjana Shlakaya Chakramatamyana Tasmai Shri Guve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, as the Charanas are saying, Hiranyakashipu was like a stake in the heart of all honest people, especially the devotees. And Prabhupada is pointing out that the demons always create disturbances in the minds of the honest devotees, is the term that he uses. And we understand that Kali Yuga, this age, is the age of disturbance. Practically everything is disturbed internally and externally. If one, for example, one could look at this in many ways, but for example, the different facets of the social system are all in disturbance. We understand through Srila Prabhupada's teachings that there are four ashrams and four varnas, that in the proper society, in the proper way, we're all supposed to work together in a way that elevates them all in Krishna consciousness. But nowadays, you can see that there's no cooperation at all, right? Uh, in Western societies, there's practically no conception of the uh, idea of renounced life. You might have some priests and nuns or something, uh, but by and large, the idea of spending any time, especially your youth, in a renounced order of life is practically unthinkable. And then, of course, there's the idea still of marriage, but it's a long way from until death do us part. Right, I think the divorce rate is probably over 50% in America uh, by now. And of course, that has ramifications for society, children, everything. And then on the Varna system, um, as well, on the Varna side, there's disturbance as well. There's the Shudra Varna, there's the workers, and in the uh, Vedic system, the idea is that you would serve your employer, uh, to the best of your ability. Take pride in your work, and treat. It's a very actually nice relationship in the Vedic. Nowadays, there's the idea of the worker versus the management. We have to fight for our rights, and agitate, using the word. Even when I was in university, there was the graduate student union that was always agitating against the university and department management. Shortly after I left, they all went on strike, which is it was a wild thing. I was seeing all the news and hearing from people. That's for another time. But one can't really blame them because the Vaishyas also uh, are nonsense in this day and age. They're not really Vaishyas because Vaishya means, of course, sustainable and protection, right? You protect, the Shudras who are working for you, the animals under your care, the earth, the people in general. Uh, well, you provide for the people in general. Nowadays, of course, business just means, how much can I make for myself, right? Greed is good, according to Gordon Gecko. And there are even Gordon Gecko is, of course, a fictional example, but there are uh, people even today who actually straight up say that I have a moral obligation to produce the most value for the shareholders. That's my morality, is that if it produces value for the shareholders, then it's good, and if it decreases their value, then it's bad. You know, what's you know, what sort of morality is this? And of course, Kshatriyas, the administrative role we've been talking about a lot lately. Uh, instead of protecting people, it's harming people in one way or another, either to just enrich themselves or just to expand their own territory. And we see this in so many places throughout the world. We're all um, familiar with the various conflicts that are going on. So, and we've been talking about them for the last, at different points in this chapter and the previous chapter. And then, of course, we get to the Brahmanas, who actually are the reason for all of the disturbance in society. Uh, because everything flows from the head. I was making this point some yesterday, and I was thinking of talking about it more today. That the corruption of the social system actually starts with the brahmanas, with the intellectuals. Because only when people have intellectual justification for all of these different things do they allow themselves to actually uh, indulge in these things and all of these nonsense activities and viewpoints and things like that. And it is the intellectuals who provide this justification for the various ways that people wish to gratify their senses. And this is done in multiple ways. All right, there's different ways that one can look at this. But this is actually what creates disturbances in the minds of the honest devotees. One of the things that creates disturbances in the minds of the devotees. Because devotees, of course, want to see everybody uh, come and participate in Krishna consciousness to the greatest ability that they can. And it is exactly these theories that uh, are diametrically opposed to any sort of God consciousness. It's not a bug or a coincidence that um, modern scientific and social theories are uh, anti-God or like are used against God. It's actually a feature of the systems to um, be atheistic. Because I'll talk about first from the scientific perspective or the viewpoint or from the lens of looking at science. Because we have this conception that, science is, objective and, very rational and very reasonable. And, there's a specific thing, there's a specific way of doing science. And it just so happens that, uh, a lot of what people are doing is not conducive to God consciousness. A lot of science people are doing is not conducive to God consciousness. But actually, there is no specific definition of what science actually is. It's really a, more historical or maybe even an emotional term for what people feel like science is. I feel this should be scientific, so I'll accept it as scientific. And I feel like that shouldn't be scientific, so I won't accept it as scientific. I'll give an example so people don't think I'm just, talking abstractly. So string theory, right? Most people, string theory. Most people would say string theory is scientific, right? So string theory, for people who might not know, is one model for unifying quantum mechanics and general relativity. So we want to make a theory that explains or can describe all of the forces, all the fundamental forces in the universe. And string theory is one such idea. And it has been a very popular idea for the past several decades. Uh, but the thing is that there's actually no evidence for it. It's just a mathematical theory. There's no empirical evidence that would separate it from any other theory that purports to describe what it actually does describe. Uh, and of course, most people, if they were trying to make a definition of science, would say empirical evidence is very important for a scientific theory. Right? String theory, for example, has none. But if you say you're a string theorist, not only people be very impressed with you, say like, oh wow, you must be so smart, and all these things. Uh, but you can possibly get a job at a university, be published in scientific journals, and all of these things. Even though string theory, it's a non-evidentiary field, right? People have even stopped talking about trying to test. There are some people who even stopped talking about trying to test string theory experimentally, just saying that, basically we just should accept it, because it explains what our current theories explain so well. Contrast this with reincarnation studies. So some people might know the name Ian Stevenson, who collected He and now his students have collected over 2,500 cases of children with where they go and interview these children, get verifiable details, and verify the details and check to make sure that the child couldn't have gotten the information any other way. And there's over 2,500 cases like this. So lots of empirical evidence. But if I went to, Physics Review D or something, some journal or Nature, and try to publish about these things, what are the chances that I'll actually uh, get published with, that sort of research? Even though it's a lot more experimentally supported than theories that do get published in all of these journals, right? Because the theories that do get published, even if they're speculative, right, and some wild things come out of physics departments, uh, like one example that comes to mind is I think either last year or the year before, there's a paper published that says that maybe dark matter is another universe, is the traces of another universe bumping into ours. Uh, no evidence, just a theory. Or that, space keeps memories of the different, uh, forces that go through it. All these things that have no evidence, but you're allowed to, get published, put on your uh, resume or CV, and get grant money for, and all of these things. And but if you do things outside the bounds, um, then you can't, even if it is very experimentally supported. And the difference, of course, is that the things that you are able to get published and funding for uh, are within the ideology of what I call institutional science. Because all of the institutions are pushing actually this ideology. And the things that are outside that ideology, so the ideology has as its basis uh, materialism, impersonalism, and mechanistic worldview. If you're within that realm, you can speculate as much as you want, right? And actually, this is what gives the speculations in that area give the illusion of vigorous and free debate, right? Because people do argue about these theories, but they only argue about theories within the box, right? You suggest anything outside the box, then you lose your job, lose your funding, all of these things. This actually happens to people, right? Uh, you know, uh, Even things that are within the box, but kind of pushing at the edge, you can lose your job for. Uh, there's various examples that come to mind. I don't know how much I should go into specific ones because if I start talking about them, we'll be here all day because there's a lot. Um, but the idea is that actually these theories, what we consider scientific, which is to be scientific. Uh, but what we actually consider scientific, it's not actually very well defined. And there are different philosophers, even non-devotee philosophers, who make this point. But the kind of impetus, even the unconscious impetus behind this, is actually, like everything in the material world, sense gratification, right? Because if everything is impersonal, if everything's just mechanistic, I push this and it goes, and then I pull it and it goes like this. And that's how the entire universe works at some level. Uh, and if it is materialistic, right, there's, nothing transcendental or nothing transcendent about my life, then, uh, I can just do whatever I want, right? I, uh, I'm not going to live beyond this body, right? I am a product of the combination of material elements that are here in my brain, which has never been proven, by the way, uh, but is considered a very scientific viewpoint to hold. Um, and because of that, I don't have to fear being judged in my next life, uh, in whatever model of that you want. So, I don't have to worry about morality, right? Well, the only morality that I have to worry about is uh, within this life, right? Am I going to go to jail, or will people stop talking to me if they found out that I did this thing? Um, Impersonalism, of course, means that there is nobody above us, right? If the fundamental nature of reality is impersonal, then in principle, I am able to be the most powerful person that there is, right? If basically we're the only persons, because that's basically where it goes down to, or the logical, or the kind of end point of this philosophy. We are the only persons, meaning that if I want, I can strive against others and control nature, uh, and also I'm able to use the bodies of others to enjoy, right? In various different ways. Either in amorous pastimes, or even with meat eating, right? So that is saying, oh, this person, right? What we understand as a person, the animal, isn't really a person, right? It's not really conscious. So therefore, I can use it however I want. Uh, and then, mechanistic ideas allows us to actually be in control of nature, according to this conception. So, in all these ways, actually, this ideology is constructed uh, to uh, push against or push back God consciousness. Um, so, it's not a neutral idea or neutral ideology. Uh, and we all have to have uh, some way of looking at the world, right? And if we look at it through this so-called scientific worldview, or this institutional scientific worldview, then we will end up just becoming disturbed. One, because we are devotees, or trying to be devotees, and the Bhagavatam worldview is very different from this institutional science worldview. So there'll be some sort of cognitive dissonance. And of course, there will be disturbance as well because it's all based on sense gratification, which is the dukkha yonaya, the cause or the source of all misery. Uh, so, we should understand the world through the Bhakti Siddhanta, through our epistemology of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Because there's a lot of disagreements between the Shastric viewpoint, through the Siddhantic viewpoint, and the so-called scientific viewpoint. And it comes down to, who do we end up trusting? Right? Prabhupada made this point about the moon landings way back in the day. That some devotees actually left over Prabhupada saying the moon landings didn't happen, and he was shocked, saying he actually said, in his humility, that whether they believe me or don't believe me, that's something else. But how can they uh, disbelieve the Bhagavatam? At other times he's made the point, you believe people went to the moon because you read it in a 10-cent newspaper, right? But you disbelieve Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And now, of course, that challenge will be renewed because, of course, there's the Artemis mission that just came back that looped around the moon, supposedly. Uh, so, as we preach and people read the books and hear Srila Prabhupada, they'll challenge again. Oh, are you saying, the Artemis astronauts were lying or something? So we'll have to say, yeah. Uh, but it all, goes back to actually who you accept as your authority. Because practically speaking, everything is based on shabda, on hearing. And are you hearing from trustworthy sources? Um, from very actually saintly sources? Are you hearing from people who can't even control their minds and senses? Which is really the question. Who are we actually going to listen to? So I'll stop here. We have about 20 minutes left in the class for comments, questions, discussion. If there's anything you want to add or take away.
I was thinking we would probably expert, but
Hmm.
the books that he has written on this institute that he started was Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology by being right?
Yes, I fast. Yeah, yeah.
And it's just swag of school,
Hmm.
because people with technology, like applied spiritual technology, yes, they don't have
Yeah,
good art things. I mean, enter the bhakti part,
yeah.
how he introduces people to Bhagavatam
Hmm.
through the scientific experiment.
Yeah.
So, Bhagavatam, science of self-realization. It's my courses is totally scientific,
Hmm.
so very nice, nicely explained.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, our process is scientific. You can actually challenge anybody to who disbelieves or who isn't sure. Just try it for 90 days, right? Chant, the required number of rounds, follow the four regulative principles, and read Srila Prabhupada's books. You don't even have to like say you believe in God or anything like that. Just, when you're reading the books, accept that within the logic of the books, uh, you know, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada basically says that, while you're reading, accept Krishna as this. And that's actually the way that I first was reading Bhagavad Gita. It's like, well, when I read Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or something, I accept that within the logic of the book, dragons and magic and all these things exist. So who says that within the logic of this book, uh, I can't accept, that Krishna exists? Then, that's how they got me. So yeah, and if anybody tries it sincerely and with openness for 90 days, then yeah, they'll if they're honest, they'll be caught. If somebody doesn't want to surrender, then nothing you can do can make them surrender. If they're like just dead set envious of Krishna. Uh, but even so, when they decide to not be envious anymore, they'll be 90 days closer to going back to Godhead. you have any comments, Prabhu?
It's interesting how, I don't know whether the Big Bang Theory is still in the mix these days.
Yeah.
Big Bang Theory is an interesting shadow of Mahavishnu exile in India.
Hmm.
You know, it has that format in there, but there's why it's expanding and contracting, and
Yeah, yeah.
they don't question how it's.
Yeah, so Prabhu was saying kind of the similarities between the Big Bang uh, and Mahavishnu's cycle of breathing. Yeah, you can sometimes draw parallels. Sometimes I think people rely too much on the parallels between these things. But yeah, and it is possible that
Theories, I mean, they're trying in their own perverted way.
yeah,
Where's this? Because we know that convolution it's in this neutral state, and then suddenly it's impregnated. I mean, intentional. It's like a bang, and then it can.
yeah. So I mean, I'll talk more generally to the point that actually, there's evidence, and then there's the interpretation of evidence, right? And they're not the same thing, right? Because for any one piece of evidence, there's lots of interpretations or understandings that one could have of that evidence. So, I mean, the Big Bang Theory gets a bit complicated. But, for example, let's talk about anthropology, right? So, like fossils and things like that, archaeology. One of the pieces of evidence that people hold up for evolution is that, um, if we go deeper into the earth, we find uh, simpler fossils. And then the more that we come up, the more and more complicated the fossils get. Of course, there's anomalous finds, and that's talked about in forbidden archaeology and all those things. So there are pushings on that as well. But the idea generally is that we find simpler things lower down, meaning further back in the past, and more complicated things closer to the present. And the interpretation people have given is that, well, the species are getting more and more complicated. Life is getting more and more complicated. So evolution. But another interpretation or another way of explaining the data, and I actually got this from Dhruta Karma Prabhu, uh, is actually as a kind of sampling error. All right, because more complicated structures are harder to fossilize, right? And lower strata are less explored than the higher strata are. So I've been actually meaning to, I've done simple mathematical models of this. I've been meaning to make a more comprehensive one. But you can actually, if you get, the probabilities, if you assign probabilities to these things, you can actually get something that looks like the fossil record, even though constant populations existed throughout, of all the species existed throughout all time. So there's two ways to interpret the evidence, at least. If one thinks about it, one could come up with more ways of interpreting the evidence, right? And a lot of how we actually interpret this evidence is based on our assumptions, right? If I assume that uh, things are materialistic, impersonal, and mechanistic, then I'll interpret all of the evidence within the framework. And if I know that there's a supreme person, that there's a supreme being, then I'll interpret the evidence within that framework, right? And a priori, so before from kind of an objective point of view, like outside both the frameworks, who's actually to say that one framework is superior to the other, right? So you have to argue to figure out which one you should go with. You have to argue from kind of a deeper level, right? So that's just what came to mind talking about the Big Bang and Mahavishnu. Is there any other comments or questions? that people have? Prabhu? Any of our online audience?
Even with evolution, you can see everything's a reflection of the material what we know it from the spiritual. So the scientists are people that can relate to evolution. We know there's evolution. The soul goes through body.
Yeah.
So everything you're seeing is it's a reflective copy.
Hmm.
It's a Kinko's copy of its true nature. Oh yeah. Oh, that's what it's a shadow. It's a shadow. It's all the word shadow. You're changing that verse comes to mind when Yo Yam Nam Tam Bhakta, right?
Hmm.
Where Krishna is so kind of the Prabhupada says that verse 721 says those who become situated as super soul.
Yeah.
Then anybody who wants, worship demigods,
Mhm.
those who worship demigods, I make them fix upon. So we all have our account, like you're saying. Krishna so kind, he allows all castaways as well. Whatever you believe in, well, fix that.
Yeah.
Oh, but forget it for anything else. It's wrong. You'll still be so compassionate. Okay, believe it. Here's your evolution. Here's your new thing. So,
Yeah, and actually, there will always be people chasing after speculative theories like this, right? Because some people have the desire for mental speculation. Back in the day, it was, Gyanis, various types of impersonalists. These days, it's scientists, right? So actually, they'll never get to a theory of everything because once they do, there'll be nothing left to speculate about. Once you conquer the entire, it's like Alexander the Great, right? He wept because there are no more worlds to conquer. Uh, and in the same way that once you figure everything out, there's no place left for mental speculation. So if you're interested in speculating, you better hope they don't figure it out, right? But you're working to figure it out, right? Yeah.
Because this actually all matter.
Hmm.
They speculate and then they come up with a new theory and it's like, and then they get new energy and then it's yours and then wow. And then it's starting to be changing. And then they keep beating around the bush basically because they don't want to accept that God has, you know, that there's a free personality.
Yeah.
so the flow, it's there.
Hmm.
Newton's first and third laws of physics change, right?
Yeah. So Newton's laws. Now we now understand that they're only an approximation, right?
The law.
Yeah. So Newtonian theory is in one direction generalized by general relativity. You could say in another direction, like when you get to the very small, generalized by quantum mechanics. So yeah, it's all only approximations, right? And people think, that's what I was talking about with the search for the theory of everything, right? That people think now quantum mechanics and general relativity are just approximations of some greater theory, whether that's string theory or loop quantum gravity or something else. People have all these speculations. It's like, oh no, all of the theories that we have now are only approximations. And people are very attached to these theories, though. Actually, there's actually a non-trivial amount of evidence that general relativity is wrong. But people really like general relativity. It's Einstein's theory. People really like it. But there's evidence that this model called modified Newtonian dynamics, or something like that, is a better way of explaining the cosmos. But people aren't really talking about it because they really like general relativity. Mostly, I'd say for emotional reasons over other reasons.
Job security.
Yeah, I mean it's job security and it's also identity, right? Because by the time you become a professor, you've sunk years and years into one tiny subfield of a subfield, generally speaking, right? So you end up being very attached to that subfield, and it really becomes a designation in a new body, right? Because if somebody goes and says, that field is nonsense, then you're basically saying that the person who spent their life studying the field has wasted their life, right? Because, especially because of how high pressure modern academia is, they spend hours and hours in the lab, maybe other relationships suffered, maybe their health suffered. They sacrificed all these things. Then somebody comes along and says it's nonsense. Then it's like people don't want to accept that.
Also, you gotta talk.
Yeah,
It's also because, we're here because we want to control and enjoy what we play God. So you push God out of the picture, then you try that.
mm,
And that's where he said, to get your knowledge from authorized sources versus I believe something. I remember where I said, belief changes all the time. Today I believe this, and tomorrow I believe something else.
yeah,
Authorized knowledge, it stays permanently, eternally. It's the eternal truth.
yeah,
Except that it means we have people that tendency to speculate, and we don't want a conclusive truth. I want to keep speculating.
mhm,
Should have called it out. Saying by saying I think that's what it's about.
yeah,
So it's I believe it's like oh, you don't know.
Believe you have to believe in God. That's why the scientific process versus believe in Jesus and believe in God.
yeah,
It's-
yeah. One can actually experience Krishna in this lifetime, right? You don't have to wait until you die to see if you got it right or not. Uh, yeah, even within this lifetime, if one follows the process, one can see Krishna.
And you could still see, and then scientific community, I know some honest scientists will say, well, it really comes down to boom, something started it all.
Mhm.
And we say it's Christian. And they say, well, it's this, and nothing. They all conclude, and then something came from something. We don't know if that's I mean, you put that equation for Christian. Oh, it's all it's so basic then. Some not even tell us like maybe it's like, well, that's about right.
Yeah, but people, don't want to accept that there's ultimately a person at the start of it all.
It's accepting the correctness of God because people don't do good limitations even of God. Which
Yeah,
often so this not be some mysterious energy because how can God because they think God is like us and
yeah, something comes to mind that back at Montrose, the preaching center a while ago. Uh, this one devotee was trying to cultivate somebody, bring them along. They were reading Bhagavad Gita, and this person just couldn't. They kept referring to the universal form. And I said, "Oh, I love it when Krishna shows his true form." Right, thinking that the universal form is the true form, right? Because it's giant and big, and um, it's like, "Ooh, wow, it's true form." Because people can't understand that actually, the two-armed, human-like form is uh, the true form of Krishna. Yeah, the original form.
That's always funny how it always says he describes the whole chapter describes about that form. And this is but it's all imaginary.
Yeah,
The planets all
What's still
it's imaginary too because Krishna's in charge of all that. Who's behind me? So it's just helping people ground, like we talk about ground. grasp your head around something.
Yeah.
Read something personal eventually.
You're saying now they're sending some from.
They just got back.
I just got out. It went out last week, right? They go out like
Yeah, it's supposed to be according to what the mission was that they weren't landing. They went off of Earth, looped around the moon, and then came back. Why they decided to spend the billions of dollars that it costs to do that? Who knows?
distraction.
Yeah, it's a distraction from the war, right? It's a distraction from Iran.
You're my house going.
Yeah, Iran is not going very well. I saw yesterday that the news said that the peace talks kind of fizzled and was, yeah, collapsed. So apparently the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. The Strait of Hormuz,
Gas is maker one.
yeah, gas is going to go up, all these things.
Gas going.
Uh, so yeah, they used the Artemis missions, the moon mission, to distract from the war, which is a distraction from the Epstein files. And now, the First Lady just gave a speech about the mentioning the Epstein files again. So now it's come full circle that, they started the war to distract about the Epstein files, and now they're using the Epstein files to distract people from the war. So yeah, it's all nonsense.
It's all related. It's all things. What a mess.
Yeah.
Down that rabbit hole.
All right. I think we're about out of time, unless there's any burning.
Thank you for.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Created, but I must rule on the law as written. I can only hope Congress does what it must, create safeguards to ensure this list is never a mechanism
So you still not.
Sharanamra ki.
Jai Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Krishna. Jai Radha Damodara Krishna. Jai Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe. 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 Jai Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe. Jai Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe. Jai Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe. Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundar Nitai Gaura Sundar Gaura Hari. Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundar Nitai Gaura Sundar Gaura Hari. Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundar Nitai Gaura Sundar Gaura Hari. Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundar Nitai Gaura Sundar Gaura Hari. Jaya Nitai Gaura Sundar Nitai Gaura Sundar Gaura Hari. Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada. Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Guru Charana Pana Kerala Bhakti Sana. Badu Ya Krishna Rapi Veda
Shri Advaita Gadadvar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Yadvaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Krishna Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Taking negative minutes, get off, stop. Jesus, I connected, get it off, put it off.